This is the Zoom session for Tuesday, February 21st, 2017. And now, let me just see here. You have the pre-fitting and fitting Microsoft Word document.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Because basically that's just a good, I like lists. When you're supposed to do something and you do it every time you see a patient, I like having it on a list. And the reason for that is, let's say you're doing 3 people the same day. Did you do number 2 or didn't you do number 2? Did you do number 5 or didn't you do number 5?
Yeah.
Did you do it with the first one and the third one, but you forgot this? You got the list, and after you do it, and this is something that happens with a lot of physicians when they're going through their residencies. The supervising doctor will let them do the histories over and over and over and over. And you'll see most doctors don't even think about it. They just go through the questions automatically. And if you watch them, if you were there for another patient, it would be the exact same order in the exact same manner, getting the same information. And this is one of the things that in a lot of fields, ours included, we seem to forget. If you do the same procedure over and over and over again, you start to get into the habit. Having a checklist. I mean, they've got the form there, but even if they didn't, they would be saying the same thing. They would put in the same little side comments on. I still use the same comment when I'm talking to a patient and I look in their ear. Everybody pulls back a little bit because you're sticking this speculum in their ear. And I always say, well, I have 2 main criteria. I have to see all the way in, but not all the way through. And they go, well, you probably will see all the way through or something. And I go, now, if I do see all the way through, you have to run for Congress. And they usually laugh at that point. Some of them don't, but most of them do. And then when I finish looking, if everything is fine, I say, well, the good news is I can see all the way in, drum looks good, and to give them a quick summary, the bad news is you can't run for Congress. So now they're a little bit more, oh, okay, yeah, good. Oh, ha. And then I go into, did you ever have any history of ear drainage? I saw some scarring on the drain. I mean, you can get the person to open up, but you do the same procedure every time. You do use the same phrasing every time. Using a list like this, where you have telling the patient, well, now once you get fit with the hearing aids, I want you to start wearing the hearing aids at home. You will make a checkoff list from this that you're comfortable with, that you feel is appropriate for your office. Now here's one. I'm going to just bring this one up. Checklist for delivery. Okay. This is one that I made up a number of years ago. And here's what it does. You take a look at it, come on. All right. I have here a list that tells me what I have, the minimum I have to discuss with the patient. Expectations and limitations. And you see I've got a strange one here that says you need to learn how to not listen again. Usually when I'm talking with the patient, we come up to that and I'll say, the fan's on, you hear this. You know why you're hearing all this background noise? Why? Because it's there. That's why they call it background noise. Hearing is here. Listening is here. So I can make you hear again, but you have to relearn what to listen to and what not to listen to. make up whatever examples you want. I usually say, if I'm looking over on this side of the wall, I'm aware of all the things in the periphery, but I'm looking at that one thing. Now, if I change my focus, I can look at different things, but I choose to do that. With hearing, it's a little bit more complicated because it's all coming in through the same source. So I'm picking it up and I have to determine up here where it is and what it is. And once I know what it is, I can either pay attention to the person that's speaking or pay attention to a violin or a fan or a car driving by. If that background sound gets louder than the signal to noise ratio comes in, and you can go into an explanation of that. And knowing the background that we had on the last test, or the test before with the signal to noise ratios, you can explain to them that someone with normal hearing, when you get this much noise, is only going to understand 50%. Well, you started at 70%, so you're going to drop down to 20%. I'm trying to get you back up as close to that 50% as possible. So you can't expect to hear everything. I mean, with experience, you'll get it. But if you don't have these checkoffs, you don't have these items to just check off to know, yeah, I remember to talk about that, it makes it difficult. Because if the patient comes back, you never said that. Well, if you have it checked off, you did. The battery size, what you did, how, the time limit for the trial period, the warranty expiration, that if once they finish the trial and they keep it, going to the warranty expiration, that's under service. You're going to be making follow-up appointments. You tell them that. What am I giving you? I'm giving you the instruction booklet, a copy of the contract that you purchased this with, a copy of this checklist, storage cases, and cleaning tools. Having all of these things and checking them off will offset some of the questions that the person has when they come back. And you can say, well, I see we did go over this last time, but I gave you an awful lot. Let's go over that again. And you can either circle it that you went over it again, or you can just go over it again. But things like, did I show them how to change the wax guards under maintenance and care? I added that in once all the manufacturers started having wax guards. Cleaning ear molds. Well, cleaning ear mold and hearing aid. They don't have too many ear molds anymore. But going through this, and if you get something and the patient is just, you can see the patient's overwhelmed, circle it with a note to be covered next appointment. And then when they come back in, what you do is you go back to the list, do the checkoffs, date next to where you did the additional work, and then make a new copy, and the patient signed it, and dates next to your date, and initials next to it. So you now have validation, or verification rather, that I have gone over all of these things with the patient. And you've got, I have read, I understand this checklist, I have seen, yes, well, everything that's checked on here is we did. I sign it, the patient signs it, we date it, it's done. So what does that do? It gives you something. You give them a copy, they now have verification. So when the daughter comes over and says, Mom, why aren't you hearing? Oh, you didn't turn them on. Didn't he show you how to work them? You can say, look, right here, see, it's signed. You didn't come with her, but here's verification that I did do this. So it gives you protection as well. Mm-hmm. And this is something that a lot of people don't think about, because in the beginning, I didn't do that. But then I started to realize either I'm going to forget something, or if they forget something and they say, you never told me.
Right.
Well, I did. You signed this saying that I did tell you. So it gives you some firmer footing as time goes on. And let's see what else we have here. Fitting, troubleshooting. Pre-fitting and fitting. Here we go. Now we're going to go through a little bit of the PowerPoint, the pre-fitting and fitting. I'm sure you have that on your system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in the Blackboard. It's on, when you go under lesson 3, there's, I think, 3 PowerPoints and the Word document.
Mm-hmm.
So you can download this and look at it at your leisure. But what I want to do is just go through it a little bit. So if you do have any questions, we can touch it. Pre-fitting, here we go. Now we're going to take that up. Go to slideshow from the beginning. And again, I mean, Ted gave me his original, so there are going to be some Canadian references in here. I did some changes also, but why it's eyes staring at you with hearing aids. But it does explain, and again, this is going back to a lot of the differences that I've told people about, optical. I use optical examples because everybody's had their eyes tested when they were in school. Everybody sees people with glasses. Everybody accepts glasses. Hearing aids, different. The difference between the intact retina and the damaged hair cells. So when you're doing eyes, all you have to do is fix the focal point. The screen will pick it up. With the hearing, we can give you a perfect signal. And what will happen is the damaged receptor will cause distortion. Let me just see here. I think someone trying to get in. Quick look. Oh no, I was just getting my daily political information. It's called the WTF happened today, which is, I mean, it really is. So let's go on here. Pre-delivery of hearing aids, you're going to go through things to help the patient understand what's going on. The fitting, you go through the delivery, you go through a verification. Verification and validation are very important because that also makes you a better provider, a better fitter, a better rehabilitation person than the one who just sticks it on their ear, adjusts it, and says, there, you'll get used to it. And we all know that there's people out there that do that. Simple things, sanitizing your hand, checking the device against the invoice. Somebody in the front office should have done that initially, but a lot of them don't know where the serial number is hiding on the hearing aid. But when you hook it up to the programmer, the serial number will come up on most of them. Red and blue indicator, you make sure it's there. And what, I mean, if the hearing aid does not already have them put on and you're putting them on, you can explain right red and blue left to the patient, which is one of the checkoffs on my delivery form. And so you explain to them the red marker, right ear, right red. That's the way to remember. You go over some of the cleaning, rough edges. You're going to be checking everything. You set everything up. The sales receipt, as you know, individualized by state or practice. The minimums are usually dictated by the state. The individual practice can make the trial period longer, changes in the return policy. Some states require the dispenser's license number, some do not. So all of this has to be in there somewhere in the paperwork. Make sure that you got the right receiver, either that is a right receiver on the right hearing aid, right length, and right power. So you're doing all of this. If you have the ability of doing pre-programming, it's nice to do it. Some of the aids, when you do that, it just makes it an extra step when you have to go in. So just get everything set. And I know with the Starkey units, when you link up to them, it goes into an automatic feedback check, best fit, boom, 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 and it goes right down the list. So doing that first and then going back for a feedback check, it's a little more awkward. Sometimes it's best setting it to that feedback test, which mutes the hearing aids, putting it in the patient's ears, and getting everything. Just go through the thing. Oticon, not necessary. You can set everything up. Then when the patient comes in, you put it in their ears. They don't have the pre-run feedback test. These are simple things. Oh, and this is the most, don't just hand the clients the hearing aids and walk them out the door. Makes sense. Again, with the checklist, you're going through battery insertion and removal, you're going through battery size. You go through that checklist, you haven't forgotten anything. One thing that we used to do, and this was early on, some places still do it, some places don't. Once you set the hearing aid and everything is working properly and the patient's happy, you take the hearing aids and put them into a hearing aid test box, if you have it, and you run a trace. Now, what have you done when you do that?
That's making sure what the hearing aids are doing are going to be doing in real life.
Exactly. You're taking a fingerprint. This is the programming I've done based on the initial settings and patient comments during the first fitting. Here's the fingerprint. If everything is perfect and they come back 6 months from now you've gone through the trial period, everything's great, you haven't changed anything. Once the fitting is finalized, you may want to do it again if you have done any changes. But when you do that, if the patient drops off the hearing aid and says it's not working right, and you listen and everything sounds fine, and you run it in the test box, usually you set it on test box setting, which tells you whether the hearing aid can do its specified, specific or specification run of output and gain and slope. If you do the run at the patient settings, when they give that to you, it should match that fingerprint. If it doesn't, something's wrong with the aid. That's why the patient's complaining. You can check by cleaning and some other things to see if you can clear up the problem. And if you can't, it's a defective component. So it's just a nice, quick way of doing it. If you don't have time to do that or you don't have a test box, it's nice, but it's not imperative. Okay. Realistic expectations. These are other things that we had. Again, we went through this 2 courses ago.
Mm-hmm.
Some patients, when they say, how long should it last? I don't know how to remember. I don't remember when I change it. Tell them to take the sticker and stick it on the calendar.
Good idea.
And just count the days between stickers. And since they should be changing both of them at the same time, it should be easy. If they're really cheap like me and they change them at different times, I don't do that anymore. I change them both at the same time, but if they were changing them at different times, they would put the sticker in the right-hand corner of the date or the left-hand corner of the date so you know which one you changed. But these are the things, checking the serial numbers, showing them how it works, what the components are, going over, putting it in and taking it out. These are all things that you're going to be going over with them, but you don't spend an hour with the person who has trouble finding their ear. You work with them. If you have someone else in the office that can work with them, fine. If you have a family member, have the family member go through the steps. Because if you sit there and go over and over and over, you'll find after a couple of times what the person's doing wrong, and you can try to counsel them on how to correct it. But there's a point where you have to say, okay, take a breather. You know, just relax for a bit and I'll be back. And then you can like do something, write up the report, do something. Or you can sit there and work with the same person for a day and a half. But you have to be the judge of where, what, and how. Components of the hearing aid. And this is pretty easy. I mean, this is what we went through in, I think it was course 140. But you know, these are all, he has some of my pictures. He has some better ones than I have. I'm stealing them for the next course I teach. But you know, all of these things, you're familiar with the different types of hearing aids. The Resound Air was the first thin tube fitting. And that was when a lot of the open ear fittings started. But they had feedback problems because you were driving the receiver so hard. The IIC, as you can see here, the invisible in the canal is down inside, going partially into the bony canal, with another portion out in the cartilaginous portion of the canal. It's usually within 2 to 3 millimeters of the tympanic membrane. You have to be very careful when you're taking impressions for this, but you have to make sure you get beyond where the tip is to end, which means you're going to be either getting really close to the drum or touching the drum with the oto block. And I went through specific training for that when I first started. The viscosity of the material is important because if the block doesn't fit tightly, you can have blow-by, and you don't want blow-by. So there's a number of things you can do. How to position, how to work with the telephone coil. Counseling them on the difference between the manual telephone coil, if they have that, or the automatic telephone coil, how to hold the hearing aid up just a little bit up to trigger the magnetic field. Telling them about assistive devices, such as the telephones, amplified phones, the FM receivers, the direct audio inputs, rechargeable. You know, just don't overwhelm them, but have the information on all these things. These are things that you should be familiar with as the provider. Because what will happen is the patient will go home and their neighbor will go, oh, well, I have this. Well, I don't have to go hunt for the phone. I just push this button and answer the phone. And they may want that. So these are all things that you have to look at. Gesundheit. Okay. Knowing the types of ear molds. Venting effects.
Okay, this is live.
Yes, I'm alive over here. Yes.
Yeah, my husband was just asking. He said dinner's ready, but
Oh.
I'll go eat later.
If you're having something good, I'll be right over. Okay, well, here, let me give you this. You know, a lot of people, pressure equalization is important, but vents will have an effect on low frequency response. So this is important. And they do have a rule of thumb for ear molds and how bad the hearing is in the lows and how small the vent can be. Variable vents help. Show them how to reduce, you know, get it in the ear, get it out. Post-fitting real ear. I love real ear. I had one of the first real ear systems in southern New Jersey when I had my practice. And then the darn thing was like $35,000.
Wow.
But it was a major investment, but it was also one of the most functional tools I could have had in fitting to find problems. So when someone came in and said, everything's fine, but if you have the real ear system on, and this was before speech mapping, this was just following the trace, and you, they said crinkling paper was driving them crazy, and you said, okay, here, like this? Yes, okay, that's it. Run the trace while crinkling the paper, and you will see the spike. and you will know what band to cut, what vent to change, and what you're doing will modify that trace. Now, you don't put in the sweep tone. What you do is you have it silent and just crinkle the paper, and you'll get a tracing, which is kind of neat. So I have solved problems that way. This is how a lot of people fit. They hit the button and hope for the best. We're better than that. Doing real ear, especially with speech mapping, that's important. And this was one of the first things. The equipment is too expensive. Now it starts at around $3,000, so it's only about 10% of what mine was. Once you get a piece of equipment and you take care of it, if it gives you what you need to make your life easier and reduce the number of visits that the patient has to come back for in order to get a satisfactory fit, you've saved yourself time, and it pays for itself in a very short period of time. Speech mapping is nice because it gives you a range, but like anything else, a target is an estimate. A target is a suggestion. It is there to give you an idea of where you might like them to be, but the patient preference will have a huge variation on it, because if they can't tolerate it or they don't like it, they will not wear it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see, and also starting them at target, most of them are going to rip it out of their ears because it's going to be too much. So if you see that you can hit target, and then take it back 2 steps, or set it to the 3rd level of adaptation, and you hit target, and then you take it back to the 1st level of adaptation, and the person goes, oh, that's so much better. You know where you were, you know where you are, here's what I'm giving you, and here's where we'd like to be. So over the next few months, that's what we're going to aim for. So these are the things that we want to look at, using these studies, using these findings, give us the information so we can actually say, here's the correction I made, not, well, I'm doing a sound field pure tone test with the hearing aids on. So I'm finding out that you're hearing the sound at 20 instead of 40. Well, that's wonderful. Is it with one ear or both ears? Well, I'll take off one. Well, no, that's not a valid test. If we correct each ear, fine. Some systems now do a binaural test, and you can see that you're hitting target on both sides or one side. So this is a good is a good system that we have here. This is from Etymotic, but there's a lot of them. And I think we went over a lot of the real ear data in the course for real ear. Some of them got real fancy and had the measurement lengths for the tube on the side. Usually, I just take a look, go past the tip of the mold, and I know that if I go the same distance each time I test the patient, I'm going to get a comparable test result. So you're doing the same thing with the mold, with the aid, or with the thin tube, or with the RIC. So these are all things for you to review. You don't want to go too far because nobody likes getting hit in the eardrum. But as you move it further and further away from the drum, you start getting very weird resonances and changes in the response curve. So you want to try to be consistent. Get it in about the same distance and do it about the same every time if you can. Consistency is the key to all of these things. Okay, now you can see the tip of that tube looks awfully close to the drum, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's still about 2 to 3 millimeters away. But, and the patient's going to tell you, oh, I can really feel it because it's right in the bony portion. But that's a good placement. So live speech, you don't have to go through the real ear unaided versus the real ear aided. I mean, some of these are research studies that are needed. You don't have to go through all of that, but it's good to be familiar with it because it gives you some of the rationale as to why these things happen. The difference between WDRC or just input compression or output compression can be seen on the tracing. All right. Let's see where we are here. These are just different examples. I mean, if we really wanted to get into this, we could do a good hour, hour and a half on just this, but I don't think we want to. Okay. Now I'll stop sharing that one. And then we'll go to this one. Share screen. Post-fitting troubleshooting. And again, since you've got it, and I know that you will be going through it later, I mean, you've seen some of these in the last presentation. But post-fitting troubleshooting, we've gone through these, reviewing the Bedfooom extension phone, which was a, wow, that was really great. These are eyeglass hearing aids, and they were considered one of the best cosmetic improvements in hearing aids in years, except that style frame was available in those days. You can see the temple piece.
Mm-hmm.
Then it made the button that goes in the ear. Remember the old transistor radios where you had that earpiece you stuck in your ear?
Uh-huh.
They made them flesh toned. So you can see right here, you can't see that she has that stuck in her ear. Sure you can. Okay. But it was an improvement over this,
Mm-hmm.
which was an improvement over this. And you can see these are all listening devices that were actually used during the war. And this is the most inexpensive hearing aid on earth. Of course, everybody does it, so, but no batteries. And you can see that you do get a nice peak at around 1800 with your hand behind your ear. They did a whole series of studies of just making ear horns, ear trumpets, all these different things into devices that could be used. Let's get past some of this. Well, this was a good one because you will find there are some people who still insist on eyeglass hearing aids. They made adapters, as you can see, that would go onto a cut-off temple piece, and that would hook the behind the ear hearing aid onto the temple of the glasses.
Mm-hmm.
Not the best solution, but it did help. Standard troubleshooting, and I'm sure you're aware of most of this. First, check the mold, check the tubing, check the ear hook. Hold your finger over the tip of the hook or over the tip of the receiver outlet. If you don't get feedback, if you're holding it up to your ear and you're listening and there is no internal whistle, you know that the system inside is intact. There's no tubing leaking in there causing feedback. Listen for static. I mean, the usual things. You're doing an electronic check. You want to try to get things clear. A lot of the new ear hooks, well, a lot of the ear hooks used to have different screens in them to keep debris and moisture out. They would get clogged, so you'd have to blow them clear or replace them. Old ear mold tube glue, when you're replacing the tubing, ream it out. I mean, these are simple step-by-step instructions that you should be well aware of, and I'm sure you are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you have a feathered tube like this, now this is both a good and a bad cut. I'll tell you why. If you look at it, you can see that the feather goes almost to the bend. So you can get it into the mold easily, but you're not going to have that much full tube diameter for a grip.
Mm-hmm.
So what you would really want, I don't even know if you can you see my
Yeah, I can
mouse?
see it.
So you'd want it cut to about here. Whoops. About here.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have this amount. And when you pull through, you'll probably pull through to a solid diameter of tubing.
Right.
A number of ways of doing it is with a side cutter. If you're going to pull out just a little bit, just pull on the end of it and snip it,
Mm-hmm.
and the tubing will pop back in. It'll slightly recess from the tip. That makes it a little easier to keep it clean with a brush. If you pull too far, you won't have enough to grip. If you don't pull enough, you'll have it protruding from the tip of the mold. One way of working with that is to take a razor blade and just go straight across the tip of the mold. And that'll give you a fairly flush, but you have to be careful with silicone and the vinyl molds. So again, it's just checking using reasonable application. Size of the tip, you want to make sure that it is a comfortable fit. When you first put the unit on them, you will feel whether it slides in easily or if it pops into place. And there's a lot of different configurations of those domes now to make them sit more comfortably, so you don't get that edge in the back. But make sure it's not too big or too small. If you're going to make an error, go a little bit too small, because you can always increase the size. And at that point, the patient's pretty used to having something there. We're all familiar with the open fittings. This is one of the problems with the thin tube. We're trying to fit a high frequency loss with the thin tube, correct?
Mm-hmm.
With the big tube, you get a good high frequency response. With the thin tube, look at how high you roll off those high frequencies dramatically. So you have to push a lot of power through. This is one of the reasons why going to the RIC made it much more successful for that type of fitting. Wax guards, there's all kinds of different types. These are before the replaceable ones came in. Yeah, final words are really important. You can go crazy trying to troubleshoot an aid. If you go through your normal checklist and you can't figure out the problem, it's time to send it in. Your first call should be, as you can see in the bottom line, how do we fix this without costing the client money? Either from the standpoint of it's under warranty, especially. If costing the client money, you should also put in there inconvenience and money. If I can fix it today and he goes home with it, he's happy, I'm a hero, everybody's a winner. If I can't fix it, I tell him, look, I tried, but it has to go back to the factory. It's under warranty, no charge. I'm sorry, you're going to be inconvenienced. It's not under warranty. The cost is going to be this, but they will be putting a warranty on. So you should be aware of that. So it's going to be a good thing. Or if it's old enough, you say, let's see, is it worthwhile putting money into this for the repair versus applying that money toward replacement? So these are things to look at, but don't be afraid to try. One of the things I said during the troubleshooting course was, don't be afraid of the oops effect. If it's already not working and you try something and then it's not working, it's still not working. You didn't make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the bogus hearing aids. These are the ones that Consumer Reports just wrote a whole thing about, saying these really don't work well. So hopefully that's going to have an effect on the decision for the over-the-counter hearing aids that are trying to be passed at this point.
Yeah, it also says something about it can even cause more damage to your hearing.
That's right. And you saw these slides in the last presentation. That's what hearing impaired sound looks like. If you just make it louder, which is what those over-the-counter things do, you have a big garbled sound. I usually tell people if I gave you a picture and it was blurry, and then I gave you a magnifying glass, what would it be? A big blurry picture.
Yeah, still blurry.
Now, if I gave you a very crisp picture, you wouldn't need as much magnification to make out the specifics.
Mm.
So this is what we're trying to do, give you enough, but not too much, after making it as clear a presentation as we possibly can. So this is a lot of work. And this is also why I stress to the patient, be picky. You have to tell me when something's not right. Even if you think, it's not so bad, tell me, because I won't adjust anything because I know I'm trying the best I can. And I will assume if you're not telling me anything's wrong, that I did it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
If something is wrong, I now know to take a different approach to modify for that problem. But you have to tell me. So don't just settle. Don't be picky, but be picky. Now we're getting into some studies for signal to noise, remotes, transmitters for the television, remote microphones. AudioScan was one of the first portable devices. It was a real ear, it was a hearing aid test box. And if I'm remembering correctly, we could also do it for real ear. So it gave us both in the same package. So that way you could do that fingerprint at the end. Most of these devices will allow you to do a hearing aid test box run. So that fingerprint can be done at the end. You're familiar with the couplers. These are things we went through about 3 courses ago. We'll just skip through this right now. Sam Liebarger was one of the old guard, and he made some very definite comments about it. And these are things that have become truisms. There were many times that I had this hanging on the wall in my office, and some patients were, they laughed about it, and others were upset. And I would ask them, why are you upset? Isn't that what you did? And most of them have to go, yeah, I did put it off for 10. Yeah, I should have done it soon, because that's it. All right, well, we've got about, let's say 5 minutes left. I'm going to give you a little bit on the last PowerPoint. And if you have any questions about it, give me a shout.
Okay.
And what I'm trying to do is basically give a narrative to the PowerPoint, because the PowerPoint itself is pretty representative of what's going on. Oh, come on, PowerPoint. There we go. And this is something else that I tell people. I can make it so the other person can hear you, whether they listen to you or not. I have no control over. And again, going through the different styles. Let's see if we can get up to where it is actually troubleshooting. You all have this type of listening tube. I have the one with a custom mold on the end. I just find it easier to carry around. doing what you're listening for whenever. That's the first thing you do, listening check. Is it working? Is it feeding back? Is it making odd noises? When you count 5, 1, are you getting a tremolo on the, which means the speaker's bad. 5, 5, 5. You should get a nice solid sound. If you're getting a low frequency resonance, maybe there's something else wrong with it. So you're looking at some other things. Squeezing the hearing aid. It's not that you're trying to get fresh. You're trying to find out, are there short circuits? Is there debris inside that when I push on it is shorting out, which means that there are times where the person will turn and it'll short out. There's nothing coming out of the hearing aid. Check the battery. If the battery's bad, check it. You still don't get output. Just the usual check. Did I put the battery in correctly? I've seen people, matter of fact, somebody just posted again in one of the audiology blogs. I fixed this problem for the patient in under 30 seconds. And he took a picture, said, I found the problem with your hearing aid, Mrs. Jones. And it showed that the battery door was open, the battery was in, and the tape was still on the battery. Yeah, they do that. Using a pencil eraser to clean the battery contacts. You can also use if you can get it in there. Otherwise, you can use a simple Q-tip. If you use isopropyl alcohol, you want to go for the 99% isopropyl alcohol. You can get it. The 70% means that there's 30% water. Mm-hmm. The 90, 95, or 99% means that there's less than 10% water, or that 1% water. So there's less likelihood of any residue or any shorts occurring. Check switches. We don't have too many of those anymore. Check the ear. Fuzzy ears. Ultrasonic cleaners are not as popular as they used to be. But if you have somebody with a standard ear mold, you want to try that. Running it in hot water and washing it is always a good thing too, because some of them get pretty grungy. And wearing gloves while you do all of this. The super dry, something like that, the silica gel in them. Go through the checklist if you have no output. If it's weak, do the same thing. You're going through a series of checks. Is something clogged? Feedback. Again, same thing. The person turns, has the volume set to full on. The nice thing about the newer aids, the digital aids, is when you turn it off and set it back on, it goes back to your preset. Mm-hmm. In most cases. Does the ear mold fit? Is the tubing cracked? I always call that plumbing problems when it's bad tubing or a bad ear hook. What was wrong with my hearing aid? Nothing. It was just plumbing problems. You had a bad pipe. You had a bad, and this is what I was talking about, the internal feedback. If you're holding it like this with your finger over the tip of the receiver, you shouldn't hear any internal noises. Distortion. Check the whole thing. Go through each of the things that you normally would. Blow out moisture. If the case is able to be disassembled easily, and some of them are one pin and you can remove the back of some cases. I know I have that with the Oticons. I'll do that and then go in and vacuum out the nubs for the receiver and blow moisture off of all the contacts and circuitry that I can see. Mm-hmm. Moisture is one of the biggest problems. Many of the new aids have openings over the microphones that are screens. Yeah. They can get clogged. Some of them can be easily replaced. Some of them you have to vacuum it out. Make sure the vent is unobstructed. Intermittent. Just go through the same thing. Check corrosion. Check drop of moisture in the tube. Sometimes it blocks, sometimes it doesn't. How much moisture is in it? I had one person who every time she went to put the hearing aid in her ear, she twisted the aid around until the tubing had, it was like a garden hose. It had a twist that cut everything off. And she's going, it's not working. And I said, well, here's why. And I showed her. She said, how did that happen? I replaced the tube. We reviewed how to put it on again. I made a couple of adjustments to try to get it into a better position for her. Checking volume controls. I mean, these are simple checks. Don't put your hearing aid on the stove. I usually tell people not to put it in the oven, but this kind of brings it into focus. On the stove wouldn't work well either. Don't wash it, dry it. Recycling batteries was important when they had a mercury content. Now it's really secondary. Some people like to save it up and send it back for the zinc compound to be recycled.
Gotcha.
But most people don't. In order to really do it, you'd have to really store up a lot and then ship it in there's a whole series of a sealed can in a box, the box in a bag, the bag in another box with insulation around it and then padded, and then shipped, which can get pretty ridiculous when you're trying to ship batteries back and they're dead batteries. A lot of people figure if the aid's not working, if my radio wasn't working, I hit it and it started. If my TV wasn't working, I hit it and it started. So they hit the hearing aid. And if, God forbid, it works the first time, they'll do it again and again. Now, the thing is, there is a way of doing it onto a padded block where you're going boom, boom, boom to try to get some wax shaken free.
Right.
But they usually do it on the table and you're getting, no, that's not the way to do it. I had people who super glued portions of the hearing aid together. So I usually tell them, do not try this at home. Do not repair it yourself. Well, why not? I know what I'm doing. This is what I do for a living. What did you do for a living? Oh, I was a plumber. You want me to come over and fix your house? No. It was the same reason I gave my brother when I said, he was like giving me a heck of a time about, let me get this out of my hair. About not fixing my own car, not changing my own oil. He worked for Ford. I said, Gary, if I fixed a car, I'm the kind of person that would probably grease the brakes because they squeaked. You don't want me fixing a car. I know what I can do and what I can't. Certain things I will do myself, check the oil, top it up, check the fluids. Replacing components, I'm at a time in my life, someone else can do it. But he loved doing it. Go have your dinner. We will enjoy. And tell everybody, and I will put a posting up that this is ready.
Okay.
And good luck on the midterm.
All right. Does that I don't have another quiz, just the midterm coming up?
Midterm's coming up next.
Okay. Got it.
I'm pretty sure that's what I did. Yeah. Now, what I'll do is I am going to post, if anybody has any questions or anything about the materials in the Unit 3, because Units 1, 2, and 3 are all going to be on the midterm.
Okay.
The midterm is going to be virtually, well, I don't think there's any fill in the blanks. It's all true, false, multiple choice.
Okay.
So tell people they can be happy and breathe a sigh of relief. And handwriting doesn't count. Okay. And it is proctored, so be aware.
Oh, it is proctored. Okay. Okay.
Okay?
All right.
All right. Have a good night. Go eat something.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a good night.
You too.